My mother was an amazing woman. She was a sister, she was a mother, grandmother, wife, even a great-grandmother. She also served in the United States Navy. She believed in integrity, honesty, and hard work. She felt like if you weren't a hard worker, you would never amount to much of anything in your life. She acknowledged and recognized this hard work with what we called the planter's peanut hierarchy. You all know planter's peanuts, in the order of their importance. You have the regular peanuts, you have the salted peanuts, you have the honey roasted, mixed nuts, cashew pieces, and then of course the ultimate, the deluxe whole cashew. Now my mom worked in a hospital, and she had several people that worked for her, and every year she acknowledged their hard work with tins of Planters nuts, depending on how hard they worked throughout that year. I know this because I had to help wrap and label these nuts. She would talk about her folks, as she called them, and would talk about how hard they worked that year. She was always very positive about them. And she would talk about how this guy was going right up that peanut ladder. He was doing really, really well. They always looked forward to those nuts. She had one man in her department, Mr. Wilson. Now, Mr. Wilson had been with her for a very long time, and he had just about forever been her deluxe whole cashew. She thought the world of Mr. Wilson. He was a highly respected man. She would often talk about people that weren't quite cutting the mustard, and she'd put them with Mr. Wilson for a day or two. She said by the time Mr. Wilson got done with them, they'd be new work ethic, new attitude, and off they'd go. Years later, my mom had a chance to take an early retirement, and she decided she would do just that. Years later, she told me, Mr. Wilson came and got her. He said, "What's going to happen when you leave? Who's going to give all the folks the nuts?" Mr. Wilson, "How long have you been my deluxe whole cashew?" He said, "I have been here a very long time." She said, "I think probably you have just answered that question. I don't have it for sure, but I'm pretty sure Mr. Wilson took over the peanut hierarchy when she left." Now, several years later, I'm all grown up and gone. Mom's retired living in Florida, and I have a family of my own. Now, she decides to utilize that hierarchy with our family too, but strangely not with the girls, just with the guys. My husband, he had gone up the ladder, and he was a deluxe whole cashew and had been for some time. And my son Jason, he had worked himself all the way up to a honey roasted peanut. But that year, he had a few missteps. A couple speeding tickets, didn't show up for school like he was supposed to, and his grades weren't quite good. That year, when he opened up his peanuts at Christmas, he realized he had gone down the peanut ladder. He was no longer a honey cashew nut or a honey roasted nut. He was now just a salted peanut. Now, he knew that he had some changes to make. Mom was very frustrated with him, and I was frustrated with him too. But we decided that, with just a little hard work and some effort, he could probably redeem himself and go farther. And change he did. He started changing for the better and doing pretty well. But that wasn't the only change that happened in our family that year. That year, our daughter got married, and here comes Richard into our family. That December, here come the package from Florida with all the presents. Jason unwraps the presents, he puts them all under the tree, and he says, "Hey, Mom, look, there's 3 tins of nuts here. Richard's got a tin of nuts." I said, "Well, of course he does." "Mom, she does know I'm doing better, doesn't she?" And I went, "Yes, she does. And she knows I've been to school and I don't have speeding tickets." I guess she does that. "She never really tells you who gets what nuts, does she?" And I went, "No, Jason, she never tells me." He just stood there a minute, took the tins of nuts, and he lined the 3 of them up on the counter, and looked at me, looked at the nuts. He picked up Richard's tin of nuts and started shaking it, just shaking it all around. And then he looked at me dead serious and he said, "You know, Mom, he better not be mixed nuts his first year." In all my years, my mother has never given me a tin of nuts, wrapped or otherwise. But I'll tell you, I've always known exactly where I have fallen in the peanut hierarchy. "Hey, Mom, it's me down here, your deluxe whole cashew. I'm talking to the folks right now. I'm talking about you." Now, my son Jason, he will be 50 years old this year. And I'll tell you right now, to this day, he has never got over the fact that Richard was mixed nuts his very first year. Several years go by, and Jason's grown up and gone, married on his own. And sadly, about a year later, my husband and I divorce. So I'm in the house by myself. And the peanut hierarchy, as far as my home, has pretty well gone to the side. About 6 or 7 years later, I meet a guy, fall in love, and decide to get married. Sadly, 4 months before that, Mom passes away. Now, Don, he's a very hard worker. He believes, why walk when you can run? And run he does. Now, at Christmas time, we never need or want anything, so it's a rare time that we buy Christmas gifts for each other. But for some reason, my husband loves to cook, and he loves frying pans. He's got frying pans in all shapes and all sizes. He likes them with glass lids, though. He tells me that you can monitor what's going on in there better. And if you don't lift the lid, it keeps the heat in. Well, he had his eye on this frying pan in this one store. It was called the Copper Chef. Every time we went into that store, he would walk over and look at that frying pan. I think he talked to it a couple times. So I thought that year, I'm just going to get him that frying pan. I'm going to get him that frying pan. And I did. I bought that Copper Chef, I wrapped it, and I hid it in the trunk of my car. Now, the day before Christmas, I'm in the grocery, picking up some last-minute things, and I'm standing there looking at my list. Holy mackerel! There they are in all their glory, the whole Planters Peanut thing, all on one shelf. I just got goosebumps looking at them and thinking about those guys. Before I knew it, I'm down on one knee, and I'm just looking at them. And when I realize what I must look like, a little old lady on one knee talking to a bunch of tins of peanuts, I get up quickly and I look around. I hope no one thinks I'm Looney Tunes, or worse yet, that they take me right out of this store. I look at those nuts again, and I just reach down and I put a tin of peanuts in my basket. I get up to the checkout. I put all the things on the belt. I pick those nuts up, and I'm telling you, just looking at them, it made me smile. Now, my husband, like I said, was well aware of the peanut hierarchy. He had heard my children, he'd heard myself talk about it for years. The next morning, he opened his frying pan. Oh, did he ever like it? "How did you know?" he said. Yeah, right. How did I? You know, you've only been talking to the poor thing in the store for the last month. And then I slid the nuts over to him. He said, "Where'd these come from?" "I think Santa might have left them." "Oh, okay," he says. So he opens the nuts. He just looks at me. He says, "Gee, thanks." I said, "You're welcome." That day, off and on, he kept staring at me. And then he'd stare at the nuts. And then he'd just smile. And then he'd do it again. He got all puffed up. It made him happy. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, I leaned over and I said, "Merry Christmas and good night, sweetheart." "Oh, babe," he said, "I think maybe I'm Mr. Sweetheart." I said, "How do you figure that?" He goes, "How many people the very first year are a deluxe whole cashew?" I went, "Yes, you're right, you're right." So, Merry Christmas and good night, Mr. Sweetheart. And Merry Christmas to all of you. And Merry Christmas to you deluxe whole cashews, wherever you are.